Alright, so now we got to go ahead and swap out our cam sprockets so that we can put the camshafts back in. These are both the same thing. The thing about it is, guys, is they're universal for both. And what I mean by that is they can be used as exhaust or intake. You see there? So depending on what cam you put it on dictates which mark you use for setting your timing against the cylinder head. Now certainly what I'm going to do is make dang sure that I mount each one of these identically onto the camshaft the way the current one is, or the current ones are, right? So what I mean by that is this thing is going to have to go in just like this, right? Got to match it up perfectly. So I have to take our time, pay attention to what we're doing. Can't screw this up, man. Otherwise your timing is just done. The other thing about this is these things are on here way tighter than 15 foot-pounds, so I've got our little impact driver. See if it'll spin them off. Just like that. It pays to have the right tools, guys. Milwaukee for the win! Alright, so like I was saying, ever so carefully we're going to utilize the hole underneath the letter E for exhaust. Like so. You feel me? Oh, and by the way, I was thinking about the fact that the manual says to loosen these before you take them out. I think it's more important that they be a little loose before you put them in. And the reason why I say that is if they're a little loose, it'll allow the slightest bit of jiggle, which will help the chain teeth or the chain links fall into the teeth. You know what I mean? Because you'll see in a minute, but the timing chain, the links are very tiny, and if you have enough wiggle, you can get it with the timing set just the way you want. So we are going to leave these a little loose so we have that wiggle, and we will tighten them up accordingly somehow on the bike. Don't really know how we're going to pull that off yet. I'm going to have to think about that. And too bad you guys aren't here with me. You can probably give me some damn good ideas about that right now, couldn't you? And I don't know why I am standing here killing my back when I have a chair. Whew, right here. We got the exhaust cam done. Now we're gonna swap the sprocket on the intake cam. I don't know if you can see, but if it'll focus, there's a little bit of wear that's noticeable. About right there. See on the teeth? There's a little bit of wear there. That's why we're changing them out. 58,000 miles. Alright, so here's our other new one. And you can see precisely we're going to put this bolt right underneath the letter E, similar to the last one. There we go. underneath the letter E. And voila! Okay. Got a little wobble while we still think about that, how we can pull that off. Because there is no room, as you guys saw earlier, there is no room to tighten foot-pound inside that engine. What I mean by that is there's no freaking way you can put a torque wrench in there. Alright, so now it's time to install the new timing chain. Start by pulling the chain guide dowels. And I'm just sticking them up here in the receiving end on the timing cover. That way they don't get lost. And they just come out the top. Yeah. There's the exhaust side. Now we'll fish the intake side up out of the top. There's your intake guide. These are expensive too. I think this is the one that's like 50 bucks. I presume there wouldn't be any excessive wear. I don't guess there is. It doesn't really look like there's any pitting or grooving per se. Should be alright. And then again, maybe that's more of my source of the rattle and startup. We'll know soon enough. Alright, so we've got to take the pickup rotor off. We have a wrench, a specialty tool, to do that. Whoa! We're still here. Oh, we're still here. Okay. Oh man. Looks like we lost our timing though, doing that. God, this was on there tight, man. Ooh, that Cummins though. It's top dead center. There. Now we'll be able to take it off. Here we go. Alright, sorry about that. We had to swap batteries. I stopped exactly where I was though. Alright, moving on. Okay. Go ahead and snip our zip tie up here. Remove our timing chain. And let's hop up on the table and compare, see if this one is any more stretched than the brand new one. Tell you one thing I noticed. This one kinks a whole lot more than the new one. So it's definitely got some wear to it. Well, I don't know. It might be minuscule, and it might be this guy. Talking about that startup rattle? I don't know. We'll figure that out later though, man. In the meantime, I gotta get the motorcycle back together. Exhaust guide in, put our dowel in, and by the way, see there's some movement here, there's a little bit of play. I don't know if maybe that has something to do with it too. I don't know. Something to think about for the future. So if you want, you can disassemble your chain tensioner and just inspect all those parts, but otherwise you need to go ahead and compress this booger and put the little safety catch on it, and that's going to be its configuration for reinstalling, and that way it'll slide all the way in. You can just tighten the bolts down, and then I guess you just trigger that little lever and it pops into place and puts tension on the chain. I guess that's how that works. It doesn't exactly go over that, but I started playing with this thing and it's kind of a bear. I haven't been able to get it down far enough yet. You have to squeeze this clip, which lets it get past these rings, which allows you to push it all the way down, and then you need to slide. See how this goes back into position like that when you're done? It needs to be up, and that little guy right there, this pops over it and holds them in place with it in the down position. So I've been fighting with this thing, see if I can get it. Dude, I am seriously gonna have to get my wife to help me do this. There is no way, man. Like, there's no hand strength in the world for that, at least not with me. Be right back. Alright, it did take the wife helping me out, and it was a pain in the butt, guys. Having to squeeze that clip. The instructions on how to do it is in your service manual, but goodness gracious, it's not easy. So I had these old pliers crimped into position on that clip while I mashed the snot out of this rod. My wife lifted the lever up onto the whole tensioner assembly like that, so it's locked into place. Now it's ready to be put back in. Considering how hard this was to press down, there's no way this thing's worn out, so this is definitely not the source of our startup rattle. Ain't no way, man. Alright guys, so we actually ran out of daylight, but here we are back on the job, and last thing I did, it wasn't on camera, but I tightened our pickup rotor bolt to 25 foot-pounds, so she's to spec. According to the manual, the next step is to install our camshafts. Now, another thing I've decided on is I cannot get to the cam sprocket bolts with the cams on the bike to tighten them to spec, which is what the manual calls for. I just can't do it. I don't know how they do it. You know, it never says to remove the engine, guys, and that's the only way I can see to get an actual torque wrench in there. And by the way, I do have an inch-pound torque wrench, and it's an itty-bitty, and it will not. I tried. It will not fit. There's not enough clearance, man. So I've elected to go ahead and tighten these to spec before we put them in, before we put the cams in. And I mean, let's be honest, guys, if it ends up being an issue for whatever reason, we'll just have to take it back apart. So it's a gamble, but it's what we're going to do for now. All right, and new discovery. I have no inventive way to grip this thing and apply 15 foot-pounds. I can't do it. I've tried. I did it off camera. I tried torquing these things. I can't hold on to this tight enough to actually do that. So here's the deal. It took the impact to get these off. It should suffice for the impact to put them back on. Uh-huh. That ought to do her. Alright, now remember the service manual calls for assembly lube on each journal. There's no easy way to do that except just to dump it in there, right? So we might as well flip it over, since that is the contact side, to put it at correct timing. we're just gonna get after it, right? Okay. Hard to do this holding the camera, but okay. Now with the exhaust cam sitting here in the engine, I want you guys to notice that the timing mark is supposed to be flush with the cylinder head, and it's not. It's tilted back just a little bit. There's a reason for that. It's a phenomenon called valve overlap. And basically what's happening here is, you see the valves on cylinder number 3? You'll notice the lobes are turned down. And so the cam, if you manually turn it to where the E is in line, you'll see the lobes interfere with the cam seating. And that is because those lobes are contacting the lifters on cylinder 3 because they are open compared to the intake side. So basically these valves are closed while those are in the middle of opening. It's how a dual overhead cam engine produces consistent power, right? So when one side of valves is closed, the other side's got to be open, and vice versa, so that the power is continuous. So that being said, there's a couple of different ways to overcome this situation. Obviously the way this works, I say obviously, I actually had to do some research, guys, because it was kind of lost on me. Essentially the act of sucking down the cam caps is going to compress the valve springs on cylinder 3, which will allow the cam to seat. Does that make sense? So we put the cam caps on and we start tightening them systematically from the inside out, just like the manual states. The problem though is that the manual is not very clear on how this is supposed to work, and so I actually learned a whole lot from the R6 forums. And not only are we going to utilize the cam caps to draw down the camshaft into a seated position, but as I understand it, there's no guarantee that the letter E is going to line up properly. So what I have read is that we want to install our timing chain on just the exhaust cam. We'll leave the intake cam out for now. We'll install the chain on the exhaust cam, remove all the slack from the exhaust side. I'm sorry, no, yeah, that's correct. Remove all the slack from the exhaust side so that this is pulled taut and tight, and essentially we're going to hold the cam into place with the E lined up by utilizing the timing chain. So it's going to hold onto the gear teeth, right, with the E in position. So the cam's going to be floating just a little bit, but again, the E will be in position and we'll suck it down that way. At least we're going to try. That's going to be our first attempt at the method of seating the exhaust cam, because it seems to be what works for the R6 guys. This most imperative task of establishing the timing is going to be the most difficult. Everything else is a cakewalk by comparison. From what I've read, it may take me up to 6, 7, 10 times before I'm happy with the timing marks at all 3 points. Okay, so there may be a lot of cutting here with the video footage, but anyways, let's just get to it and we'll see what happens. Remember guys, the manual calls for all of the cam cap bolts to be, I'm just gonna dip them in oil like it's some freaking wine vinegar, but yeah, you basically want to have engine oil applied. So got some old mow tool here and thread them in with that. Now also, one thing I forgot to mention is that as this cam starts to seat, supposedly it's going to want to make the rotor wheel tilt. Obviously, right, because we have it pulled taut with the letter E timing mark turned the way it's supposed to be. So as this thing seats, it's going to pull the entire thing clockwise, thereby jacking with the timing a little bit. So they say to back it up just a few degrees, which I'm going to go ahead and do, and I'm going to have to be real gentle because I've already wrapped that chain around the exhaust cam sprocket. So let's see if I can gingerly do this. Nope, it's going to have to come apart. I've already got a cam cap threaded in and it's not going to work out, so stand by. Alright, so we're going to back her off just a few degrees, very carefully, not too much. About like that. That's just a guess, guys. Again, the idea is that when it all seats, it's going to suck it back onto timing. Maybe a smidge more, about right there. We'll just see what she ends up looking like. And of course, it's worth taking note exactly how far back I went, and I have that mentally made now. Okay, let's reestablish our cam and chain position. Got to make sure you don't drop this chain on there too, man. That will be a pain in the butt. Hold on to it. You know, one thing about the R6 compared to the FZ6R, all of this area I'm working in right now on an R6 is open. Isn't that crazy, man? Like, just, this is so much more difficult with the dang framework being in the way it is. It's horrible. Just horrible. So they say what you can do is actually zip tie the chain into place onto the sprocket to help aid in this endeavor, this trickiness. And so we're going to do that. I don't know how necessary it is, but as difficult as everything else about this is, I figure it's not a bad idea. Yeah, I just used my teeth. I don't know if you can see that, but don't judge. There you go, guys. It worked out. Like a charm. Pro tip though, and we're running out of daylight again. I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this is actually taking multiple days. I'm a working man, guys, Monday through Friday, so it is what's today? It's freaking Wednesday after work, so I know it looks like daylight out there, but that's the sun setting. Anyways, guys, pro tip, that chain guide works wonders, and that's one thing on the R6 forums that wasn't really mentioned, was what role the chain guide would play in getting that side, the exhaust side, taut, you know, tight, taut, same thing, right? And so the chain guide was absolutely crucial. Now, otherwise you're just fighting back and forth, you know. But that sucker is on there. I'm just gonna leave the zip tie on for now and take it off later, but there you go. And it's time for the intake cam, man. Oh, so as we start losing natural light, there you go. Lay some assembly lube down in the journals, and we'll get her seated as well. Alright, so there's the intake cam. She's in. We got the timing chain on there too. I'm happy with it so far, guys. We're gonna put the caps on the intake cam and then call it a night, and we'll have to come back probably Friday afternoon. Today's Wednesday. My kid has to meet his teacher or whatever tomorrow evening, so one thing at a time, guys. This is going to be a week-long process. Pretty crazy, but if we still have any daylight left, I'll come back and show you the intake cam button down. Oh, and by the way, the exhaust intake caps are not torqued to spec. They're just all tightened down, so don't worry about that yet. Oh, and before we put the caps on, one thing I want you to notice, if it'll focus and everything, See that gap right there on cylinder number 1? So that's a little bit of valve overlap on the intake side. It's not nearly as severe as it was on the exhaust side, and in fact we don't have to brace the cam into position like we did on the exhaust side, but in the intake cams situation, it is actually cylinder number 2 that is partially open. You see the lobes touching the lifters? That's on cylinder 2. So intake cam cylinder 2 valve overlap, and exhaust cam cylinder 3 valve overlap, just for your reference, so you know what to expect to see when you're up in here. And fast forward 5 minutes later, what did I forget, guys? Hey, look, I didn't edit this in a special way. We're just right back where we were just a minute ago, because I want to show you where I just screwed up. How do you suppose we're supposed to get the dadgum intake chain guide, or the intake guide, in there when we have the freaking cam in? Look, there's no room to put the guide down there. Idiot. Take it apart. Alright guys, it's the next day. I did get both cams back in last night. Really wasn't that big of a deal. You know, they went in nicely. As far as timing goes though, I'm not happy with it, because our little backwards adjustment, in hopes that it would kind of pull the slack forward, it did not. So it's still slightly behind timing, as you can see. So I'm gonna take it back apart today. I have just enough time before dark to do that. Tomorrow's Friday, and the hope is that I'll have all the timing good to go, and it'll be able to turn over by hand and hold timing by tomorrow evening. And Saturday morning is the big day. That's the plan. Hell, it looks like it did when I opened it up in the first place, right? Except for the timing mark being a little off. So I'm gonna make that adjustment, and we'll come back tomorrow and have another look. Alright folks, so here we are the next day. It is Friday evening. Yesterday evening I did complete the cam installation. There you go. The cam caps are not torqued down though. I've only got them all just hand tightened, just in case it's all got to come back out, because the next step is going to be to install the timing chain tensioner, and then what you want to do is gently perform 1 revolution just to see and make sure that the motor doesn't bind up, because if for whatever reason we have inadvertently screwed up the timing, the engine will let us know pretty quick. The valves will bind up and she will not rotate. So it'll be pretty obvious in the first rotation whether or not we've correctly timed this thing. But as you can see, timing chain guides are all in. Our timing mark is set on the crank. Our exhaust timing mark is flush with the case, with the cylinder head. And I don't have a light to shine in my hand, but the intake mark is also flush with the head in there somewhere.